Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm Marzia Hashemi. Thanks so much for being with us. Well, under UK and international law, visiting heads of foreign governments, such as Prime Minister Netanyahu, have immunity from legal process and cannot be arrested or detained. This is according to the British government regarding a petition of more than 100,000 people to the UK Parliament's website, demanding that Netanyahu be arrested for the murder of more than 2,000 people during the war in Gaza last year. So why would Israeli Premier Netanyahu be protected by British law after committing murder when London prides itself for saying that it stands for justice?
An online petition posted on the UK Parliament's website calls for the arrest of Israel's Prime Minister upon his arrival in London on Wednesday. Activists, including the initiator of the petition, Damien Moran, say under the international law, Netanyahu must be detained for war crimes against Palestinians in the besieged Gaza Strip during last summer's offensive.
According to the international law and the British law itself, this obviously the leader of the Israeli government, who is Netanyahu, visiting us next week, he's actually, according to Geneva Convention, committed crimes against the international law, and the British government should actually have him accountable for that crime.
The British government has already issued a response to the petition. It ruled out the possibility of arresting Netanyahu, saying visiting heads of foreign governments enjoy immunity from prosecution. Also, Israel has dismissed the petition as meaningless. Experts believe that a petition will lead to further isolation of Israel.
More and more people, and not only in Britain, it's even happening in America, as I'm sure you know, they are becoming aware that Netanyahu is a disaster, not only for the Palestinians, but for America, but also for Jews, for the Jews of the world. You see, what is happening as a result of Netanyahu's policies is that we are witnessing a rising global tide of anti-Israelism.
Israel has launched 3 devastating wars on the Gaza Strip since late 2008. The latest war in early July 2014 left over 2,140 Palestinians, including nearly 580 children, dead. More than 11,000 others, including some 3,400 children, 2,000 women, and over 400 elderly people were also injured. The offensive also left about 500,000 people displaced or homeless. Israel's wars on Gaza and its years-long siege of the territory have given rise to increased calls for the trial of Israeli leaders for war crimes at the International Criminal Court.
I'd like to welcome my guest to the program out of London, Jeffrey Alderman, Professor of History and Politics, University of Buckingham, and Hafsa Kara Mustafa, journalist and political analyst, also out of London. Thanking you both for being with us. Well, let's start this off with Mr. Alderman. Professor, according to the UK's own rules, 100,000 signed petitions can bring the subject to be debated in Parliament. How can the Parliament actually ignore this demand, or is it that simply the subject is discussed but with no responsibility to really act upon it?
Well, since the petition has gained 100,000 signatures, there will have to be a debate. This will probably be a Westminster Hall debate rather than a debate in the House of Commons itself. And various points of view will be put, and the government will respond to the debate. In a sense, the government has preempted this by saying that under no circumstances will it permit Mr. Netanyahu to be arrested. And it goes on to point out that, in principle, the Conservative government supported Israel's right to intervene in Gaza after rocket attacks from Gaza on Israel. So we'll have a debate, but it will not come to any definitive conclusion other than the airing of the subject.
Well, the definitive conclusion would appear that actually nothing is going to happen to Netanyahu when he enters the UK. Okay, well, Ms. Kara Mustafa, looking at this, is the answer then to take Israel to the International Criminal Court instead, although some would ask, how can this be done when we have witnessed that even at the ICC, when it comes to Israel, it appears to be hesitant and somewhat biased, as we saw when the court refused to charge Tel Aviv with war crimes based on the 2010 attack and murder of activists from that aid ship?
Well, that would be an understatement to actually state that the ICC is too scared to intervene. If you'll remember the NATO onslaught on Libya, Mr. Ocampo, who at the time was the main prosecutor of the ICC, issued an arrest warrant on Muammar Gaddafi within a week of uprising starting, although based on mixed reports coming out of Libya stating that a massacre had taken place. And of course, we now know that no massacre actually took place, but the arrest warrant was nevertheless issued. Now, when you look at the onslaught on Gaza in the summer of 2014, you will see that numerous violations of international law were committed, including the destruction of hospitals, of UN shelter, of schools, and of course, we'll all recall the killing of the Bakr brother on a beach in broad daylight by soldiers, and yet still that did not prompt the ICC to act or react. So I think the ICC has already proved that it was a very scared institution, that it will not touch Israel under any circumstance. But of course, when we're discussing this petition in the UK, we also have to recognize that nothing will come of it in substance. But I think it's a major step forward for the Palestinian cause to show that public opinion has greatly shifted in favor of the Palestinian narrative.
Well, let's talk about that shift that you just talked about, Ms. Kara Mustafa, this question to Mr. Alderman. It appears that there is a schism between actually public perspective and official government line regarding this situation with Israel. How do you see it?
Well, I'm not sure that there's a split, but I might agree with you if you would say there's a mismatch, a misalignment. The British government is the present British government, a Conservative government, is close to Israel for two reasons. Firstly, trade between Israel and the United Kingdom has never been higher. But secondly, and much more importantly, there is an unprecedentedly high and deep level of cooperation on the security front. I don't think it's without significance that last week the government announced the bestowal of new peerages on people therefore going into the House of Lords, the so-called upper chamber of the British Parliament. And one of those peerages is to the director of the Conservative Friends of Israel. So you can see how close the relationship is between Israel and the present Conservative government.
Okay, stay with me, both my guests, Mr. Alderman and Ms. Kara Mustafa. We're going to cross over to our Facebook wall and see what our viewers have actually mentioned about this subject.
Netanyahu must be arrested and hanged. The world would be a better, safer and more peaceful place without terrorists, Netanyahu and his Zionist sympathizers. Will the arrest of Netanyahu liberate the Palestinians, or will it bring back the lives of the dead people of Palestine? Even if he is arrested and found guilty of war crimes, that would still not provide solutions to the problems Palestinians are facing. What Palestinians need is a lasting solution to their problems, not the arrest of Netanyahu. Kill Netanyahu, the big terrorist on the earth and bloodthirsty. Start with Blair and Bush for their crimes against humanity and not fighting against terrorism. I think Netanyahu is already dead, emotionally as well as morally. It is then a simple request by the people for the UK government to arrest this bloodsucker. Let just citizens attack him in his hotel in London. That criminal must pay for his crimes. This petition won't do anything. The men within the British government are on Bibi's side. Nothing will change with the petition. The father won't arrest the child, just some verbal slaps on wrist. I wonder why the International Criminal Court fails to bring this Israeli leader to justice.
what about some of these comments that Ms. Kara Mustafa, one of them basically saying they didn't arrest Blair and Bush, and that the men in power in the UK are on Bibi's side. So actually nothing is going to happen. Your take?
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think even the gentleman who actually initiated the petition recognized that the arrest wasn't going to happen. I think we know full well. But again, this is very much part of the campaigning for Palestinian rights, whereby this is making sure that the plight of Palestinians is aired. And I think managing to get a debate is absolutely a fantastic thing, because it means that the issue is going to be put on the table. Now, for many years in the UK, the narrative has been dominated by mainstream media organizations that have only almost presented the Israeli side, and to such a point that in fact public opinion, British public opinion, up until 2011 actually thought that the Palestinians were occupying Israel and not the other way around. Now, of course, with the emergence of internet, of social media, more and more people have become aware of the situation in Palestine and of Palestinians and the plight of Palestinians. And I think this shift in opinion, which is translated in the number of people who've signed the petition, actually shows and translates that shift in public opinion and the desire for British people to actually see justice served for the Palestinians. So of course we're not going to see Netanyahu arrested, and sadly we're not yet going to see Bush or Tony Blair arrested for their crimes either, because of course international law, according to international Western capitals, only applies to African and Arab leaders and certainly not to Western leaders or Western friendly leaders. But of course this is a step in the right direction, and I think on that particular point it's very commendable.
Well, Mr. Alderman, the British government